What happens when one of the world's biggest superstars sits down for what's supposed to be a routine interview, only to be ambushed on live television? Today, we're unpacking the explosive moment that ended with Jennifer Lopez walking off set and Megyn Kelly scrambling to recover. What started as harmless promo turned into one of the most dramatic breakdowns in daytime TV history. Make sure to subscribe and leave a comment, because this story is something you have to see to believe. Jennifer Lopez arrived at the studio that morning expecting another standard media stop. Just one more interview to promote her latest album and upcoming film projects. She'd done this thousands of times over her decades, long career, always poised, always professional, even when the questions got tough. The plan was simple. Talk music, tease a few movie roles, maybe share a lighthearted story. 20 minutes and done. But what she didn't expect was to face a host more interested in sparking controversy than conducting journalism. Megyn Kelly, facing sagging ratings and growing pressure from producers, was desperate for a viral moment. And when Lopez was confirmed as a guest, Kelly saw her opportunity. She spent the night before digging. Every scandal, every headline, every sensitive detail she could weaponize. She wasn't looking for an interview. She wanted a takedown. It all started innocently enough. Lopez entered the studio, radiant as ever, flashing her iconic smile as the audience roared. She wore a cream-colored blazer that glowed under the lights, her hair cascading in soft waves. She greeted fans with warmth and grace, clearly at ease. Kelly welcomed her with practiced charm. "Jennifer, it's wonderful to have you," she said, voice sugary sweet, but eyes razor sharp. "You look absolutely stunning as always." "Thank you so much for having me, Megyn," Lopez replied, settling into the guest chair like the seasoned pro she is. "I'm really excited to talk about all the amazing things I've got coming up." But that excitement wouldn't last long. Kelly glanced down at her notes. "Yes, let's talk about those projects," she said casually. "But first, I have to ask about something that's been making headlines lately." Lopez's smile didn't break, but her posture shifted, just slightly. In this business, making headlines almost never meant anything good. "Of course," Lopez said, diplomatic. "I'm happy to answer whatever you need." Kelly leaned in, voice tightening. "There have been some reports. Suggestions that your public image doesn't quite match your private behavior. Critics say you've become disconnected from the community that first embraced you. How do you respond to that?" It landed like a slap. This wasn't a question. It was an accusation, wrapped in Fox curiosity. Lopez had been asked difficult things before, but there was something cold, calculated, almost cruel in Kelly's delivery. "I'm not sure what you're referring to specifically," Lopez replied, steady but firm. "I've always been proud of where I come from, and I do everything I can to give back to my community." But Kelly wasn't letting go. "Surely you understand why some people feel that way," she said. "When was the last time you were actually in the Bronx? Not for a photo op or a charity event, but just as Jenny from the block." The tone was unmistakable now, mocking, sharp, cutting. She had taken Lopez's most iconic identity and turned it into a punchline. The audience shifted uneasily. What was happening? This wasn't the interview they'd expected. Lopez took a deep breath, her media training holding strong. "Megyn, I think there's a misunderstanding," she said. "I visit my family and friends regularly. I've spent my life supporting underserved communities, not just in New York, but all over the world." Kelly pounced. "But that's exactly what I'm talking about," she said, voice rising. "Everything you do now feels curated, calculated. The cameras are always rolling. The press releases are always ready. Doesn't that feel a little manipulative?" The air turned toxic. Lopez felt her control slipping. This wasn't an interview anymore. It was a public ambush. "I find that question incredibly unfair," she said, her voice firmer now. "When you're in the public eye, everything gets filmed. That doesn't make the work any less real." My love for my community is real. But Kelly had her where she wanted her, on the defensive. Let's be honest, she pressed. You've built a multi-million-dollar brand on selling a fantasy. The whole Jenny from the block image, come on. Isn't that just marketing? A way to stay relatable while living a life most people couldn't imagine. Even the studio crew was growing visibly uncomfortable. This had gone beyond journalism. This was a televised takedown. Lopez stared at Kelly, eyes flashing with fury. She had built an empire without ever losing her cool. But Megyn Kelly was pushing her to the edge, and that edge was coming fast. "Megyn," Lopez said slowly. Her tone calm, but laced with a warning sharp enough to cut through the tension in the room. "I came here to talk about my work. About the projects I care about. The ones I'm excited to share with the world. What I didn't come here for was an ambush disguised as journalism." For a brief moment, there was silence. Then Kelly smirked. It was the moment that revealed everything. Instead of softening or retreating, she doubled down. "Well, Jennifer," she said, voice syrupy with condescension, "I think our viewers want honesty, not just rehearsed promo. If you can't handle real questions about your public image, maybe you shouldn't be doing interviews." The air thickened. The insult wasn't subtle. It dripped from every word. Kelly had just accused one of the most accomplished women in entertainment of being too fragile for honest conversation. The audience began shifting in their seats, uncomfortable now, glancing at each other as the tone turned overtly hostile. Inside Lopez, something gave. She'd faced criticism for decades, relentless, often cruel, but she'd always kept her composure. Until now. "Handle real questions," she repeated, her voice rising just enough to signal the shift. "Megyn, there's a difference between journalism and whatever this is. Real journalists ask hard questions with respect and integrity. What you're doing right now is fishing for drama, and frankly, it's beneath both of us." Kelly's eyes lit up. This was what she wanted. Tension. Headlines. Viral moments. She leaned back with the smug satisfaction of someone who had successfully provoked her subject. "So now I'm not a real journalist," she said, her fox outrage laughable to anyone paying attention. "I've been doing this for decades. I've interviewed presidents, world leaders, celebrities who thought they were too important to be challenged. The fact that you're getting this defensive tells me I'm asking the right questions." It was textbook manipulation, twist the narrative. Cast yourself as the truth teller and frame your guest as the fragile diva. Lopez leaned forward. Her expression was no longer just composed. It was furious, but controlled. Defensive. She shot back. "No, Megyn. I'm being honest. You invited me here to discuss my work. And instead, you're attacking my character based on tabloid headlines and your own assumptions." Kelly cut her off with a sneer. "Tabloid gossip. I'm talking about facts. Documented behaviors. Patterns, your business decisions, your relationships. These aren't assumptions. Jennifer, they raise real questions about authenticity." Authenticity. The word hit like a slap. It was a direct attack on Lopez's very identity, on everything she had built, fought for, and represented. To suggest she was fake, manufactured, a brand and not a person, it was a violation. Lopez stood up. Her chair scraped against the studio floor, the sound echoing like a gunshot in the now silent room. Gasps rippled through the audience. In her entire career, Jennifer Lopez had never walked out of an interview. But this wasn't an interview anymore. "You know what, Megyn," she said, voice low but pulsing with fury. "I've sat through thousands of interviews. I've answered hard questions. I've addressed my mistakes. I've talked about my growth. But never, not once, have I sat across from someone so determined to be cruel just for ratings." Kelly flinched. Just barely. Her ego wouldn't allow her to admit she had gone too far. She was locked in now, unable to pivot. "Jennifer, please," she tried, a note of mock concern seeping in. "If you can't handle a challenging interview, how can your fans trust you're being real in your music? In your movies?" It was the final straw. Kelly had just equated enduring a public ambush with artistic integrity. Lopez stared at her, stunned not by the malice, but by the shamelessness of it. "Handle a challenging interview," she repeated, her voice now shaking, not with fear, but rage. "You're not challenging me, Megyn. You're humiliating me. There's a difference. You don't care about the answers. You care about breaking me down on camera." The studio was frozen. Even the crew seemed unsure whether to cut to commercial or let it unravel. The only sounds were the faint hum of the equipment and the unspoken tension hanging in the air. What had started as a promotional segment was now something else entirely, something raw, real, and unforgettable. The audience looked stricken, frozen in their seats like witnesses to a car crash unfolding in slow motion. What had begun as an interview now felt like a public execution. No one knew where to look. Some stared down at their shoes. Others glanced uneasily at the cameras, as if unsure whether to keep watching or run. Kelly leaned forward, trying to regain control, not of the conversation, but of the optics. "I'm asking the questions your fans want answers to," she said, voice taut with justification. "Questions about whether the person they see on stage and screen is the same behind closed doors. If that makes you uncomfortable, Jennifer, maybe that says more about you than it does about me." It was a masterclass in gaslighting. Kelly cloaked her aggression in Fox advocacy, pretending to speak on behalf of Lopez's fans, while actively trying to dismantle the very person they adored. The hypocrisy was staggering. She was wielding her platform not to challenge or enlighten, but to wound. This wasn't journalism. It was performance. Character assassination packaged as a candid conversation. Lopez shook her head slowly, disgust replacing restraint. And in that moment, she saw Kelly clearly. Not as a host, not even as a person, but as a machine programmed for conflict and calibrated for cruelty. "You want to know who I really am, Megyn?" she said, her voice calm but edged with steel. "I'm someone who's worked relentlessly for everything I've achieved, based on talent, dedication, and yes, authenticity." She wasn't yelling. She didn't need to. "I've made mistakes. I've owned them. I've evolved both as an artist and as a woman. But what I won't do, not for you, not for anyone, is sit here and let myself be torn apart for your entertainment." She reached for the microphone clipped to her dress and began to unfasten it. Graceful, measured, unshaken. The gesture alone spoke louder than anything she'd said. "This is over." Kelly stiffened. "Jennifer, wait," she stammered, panic slipping through the cracks of her polished facade. "There's been a misunderstanding. I'm just trying to have an honest conversation about your career, your influence on the culture." But Lopez had heard enough. "No, Megyn. There's no misunderstanding," she said firmly, standing now. "You knew exactly what you were doing. You invited me here under the guise of promoting my work, and instead, you tried to turn me into a spectacle. That's not journalism. That's cruelty." The word landed with precision. "Cruelty." Kelly visibly flinched. Because the accusation wasn't just accurate, it was undeniable. But instead of absorbing it, she deflected. "Personal issues." Kelly snapped, her voice now openly hostile. "Jennifer, the only person here with issues is the one who can't answer basic questions without falling apart. Maybe the problem isn't with me. Maybe it's you. Maybe you've lived in a bubble so long, you've forgotten what real accountability looks like." The audience collectively held its breath. Lopez didn't move. She finished unclipping her mic and placed it gently on the side table, her composure unbroken. Then she looked up, and her eyes burned with a clarity that silenced everything else in the room. "Real accountability," she echoed. "Let me explain that to you." She stepped closer, not to intimidate, but to be heard. "Real accountability is recognizing when you've crossed the line. It's using your platform to inform, not to humiliate. It's remembering that there's a human being sitting across from you, not just content to monetize." Kelly's face turned crimson. Somewhere in her, the truth was registering, but her pride wouldn't let her admit it. Instead, she struck again. "Don't lecture me about accountability, Jennifer," she hissed. "You've built your whole career on selling an image. Now someone asks real questions, and you want to play the victim. That's not accountability. That's manipulation." It was laughable, shameless. Lopez stared at her, stunned by the sheer audacity, the projection so transparent it was almost pitiful. "You want to talk about manipulation," she said, her voice now low, steady. "You lied to my team, told them this was a standard promotional interview. You've twisted my words, ignored every attempt I've made to connect with honesty, and turned this into a circus. If anyone here is being manipulative, Megyn, it's you." The studio was still, utterly still. What was supposed to be a feel-good interview had become something else entirely. A reckoning, and everyone in that room could feel it. Kelly, desperate to reclaim control, went for one last blow. "You know what, Jennifer?" she said, venom coating every syllable. "Maybe this is what your fans needed to see. Maybe they needed to know that behind the glamour and the red carpets, you're just another entitled celebrity who can't take a little heat." Lopez blinked. The insult didn't sting, it simmered. The mask was fully off now. "Entitled," she repeated, almost laughing at the absurdity. "Megyn, I've worked for every inch of what I've built. I came from nothing. I faced rejection and setbacks that would have crushed most people. And I kept going, because I believed in something bigger than ego." She stepped back, separating herself physically and spiritually from the poison across the table. "I've never asked to be idolized. I've never demanded blind loyalty. I've made it by showing up, every single day, with discipline, with love for what I do, and with respect for the people I work with." Then she paused, long enough to let the weight of her next words hang in the air. "But what I won't do, what I refuse to do, is let someone like you try to tear me down for your own desperate grab at relevance." The silence that followed wasn't awkward. It was sacred. Because in that moment, Lopez didn't just walk away from a toxic interview. She reclaimed her voice. "You've turned journalism into a blood sport," Lopez said, her voice calm but laced with steel. "And somewhere along the way, you forgot that there are real people on the other side of your questions." That's not entitlement, Megyn. That's called self-respect, something you clearly don't recognize. The silence that followed was electric. Jennifer Lopez had just delivered a takedown so precise, so composed, it felt like time had stopped. Megyn Kelly sat frozen, her mouth slightly ajar, struggling to absorb the weight of the moment. But Lopez wasn't finished, not by a long shot. Years of quietly enduring slander, years of holding her tongue in the face of manufactured outrage and headlines meant to belittle. Lopez let it all go in that moment, and it was devastating. "You want to know what's truly sad about all of this?" she continued, her tone now softer, tinged with something dangerously close to pity. "You had a chance today to have a real conversation with someone who's lived a full, complicated, beautiful life. I could have shared something meaningful with your audience, something inspiring, but instead, you chose to ambush me. You used your platform to tear down, to divide, not connect." Kelly tried to interrupt, her voice small and uncertain. "Jennifer, I think you're overreacting to a few fair questions about your career, your image." Lopez raised a hand. The gesture alone stopped Kelly mid-sentence. It wasn't loud. It wasn't theatrical. But it carried more weight than anything Kelly had said the entire interview. "No, Megyn. I'm done listening to you spin this as journalism. I'm done pretending that what happened here today was anything other than a thinly veiled attack dressed up as tough questions. You've shown your true colors, and they're ugly." She rose from her chair. Each step toward the edge of the set elegant, deliberate. What could have been an awkward exit became a statement. A reclamation of dignity. Kelly scrambled for control. "Jennifer, please, don't walk away. Let's just talk this through. There's common ground here if we—" Lopez stopped, turned, The look on her face was a chilling blend of disappointment and contempt. "Common ground," she repeated, incredulous. "There's no misunderstanding here, Megyn. You know exactly what you did. And so does everyone watching." Then she faced the camera directly, as if speaking not just to the audience, but to anyone who had ever been dragged through the mud for sport. "To those watching, I want to say this: you deserve better. You deserve media that asks hard questions without cruelty. You deserve interviews that seek truth, not viral humiliation. What happened today wasn't journalism. It was exploitation. And we should all demand better." With that, Lopez walked off the set, graceful, composed, unshaken, leaving behind a stunned audience and a visibly shaken Megyn Kelly, who sat in silence as the cameras continued rolling. The only sound in the studio was the echo of Lopez's heels on the studio floor, each click underlining the collapse of Kelly's credibility. After several long seconds, Kelly finally spoke, her voice unsteady. "Well, that was certainly unexpected. We'll be right back after the break." That everyone knew. There would be no coming back from this. Jennifer Lopez hadn't just walked out of an interview. She had peeled back the mask on performative journalism and exposed it for what it was. The show cut to commercial. The audience sat in stunned silence, still processing what they had just witnessed. What was supposed to be a routine celebrity interview had become a televised reckoning. An unforgettable moment of one woman refusing to be reduced, live in front of millions. So what do you think? Was Jennifer right to walk out? Or should she have stayed and played by the rules of the show? Let us know in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe for more real moments that cut through the noise.